Hello everybody, welcome back to Sumi Learns. If you're new here, my name is Sumi, and at this point, I don't even know what my niche is. I keep dropping off YouTube and coming back. I'm filming whatever my heart desires at this point. And right now, something I've been thinking of is a lot of people in my real life have been asking me about like PhD programs and how to get into PhD programs. And I am in one, and I know that when I applied, there was so many things that I learned and things that I was like, I'm going to share this with other people just in case they don't know about all these different things that I learned. And I know that right now, like December 1st, December 15th is the deadline for most biomedical sciences PhD programs, which is what I applied for. So I just wanted to share some things that I wish I knew before I applied and that I wish I had done differently so it can hopefully help someone out there. So I'll just start off strong. And the first thing is, if you're an international student like me, I wish I knew that like I should have applied to more private schools rather than public schools. So something I didn't know, which is my understanding now, is that for public schools, international students are more expensive, even at the PhD level. So you would see on some of their websites, for example, UCSF, which I applied to, they say that they only accept one or two international students. I think I applied to maybe like 5 or 6 public schools, and I wish I had known that my chances there were so much slimmer than applying to private schools that like I thought were like even Ivy Leagues. I thought, oh yeah, I could never get into or something. I wish I applied to more private schools. And then the second thing on my list is that you really, well, now it might not be as helpful, but depending on when you watch this video, you really should save up. These applications are so expensive. I'm pretty sure I spent over $600 just on like application fees. So expensive. And again, if you're an international student, typically the application fee is more expensive, but also you don't get fee waivers. If you're a domestic student, you should definitely try and get fee waivers if you can email them or like whatever you could do. But I'll also share a resource in the description link that I found of schools that had no application fees even for like international students, because there were still a couple of schools that I was able to get, thankfully, like fee waivers even though I was international. But that's definitely the outlier. For most schools, if you're international, you don't get a fee waiver. So definitely save up because it can be really expensive. And number 3, this one is more a resource, but this is something that I used and helped me so much. And like I feel like everybody needs to know about it. So the third one is this podcast called Hello PhD. If you're not listening to this podcast, you absolutely should. So this podcast is hosted by 2 PhD holders, Josh and Dan. And I believe it's Josh who they both went to University of North Carolina, the BBS PhD program there. And Josh actually ended up serving as like the head of admissions, I believe. So he knows a lot about admissions, and yeah, he just gave so much good advice. They also interviewed a lot of people. They have episodes on like letters of recommendation, things that you like should do differently in your application, on statements of purpose, things like that. It helped so much. I literally listened to at least like 50 of their podcast episodes just back to back. I binged listened to it, and it was so incredibly helpful. I also met Josh actually, so I'll pop up the picture somewhere because I was so excited when I met him. It was very awkward, but I was very excited. Another thing that I wish I had known was that when I'm picking schools, so something I did which wasn't very smart was I picked schools based on the school first, and then after I picked the school, I went back to look for professors. But that actually wasn't very smart because, for example, when you write your personal statements and even when you choose the school, you want to be able to have multiple professors that you could potentially work with, because our program, most BBS programs are rotation based. So if you're applying to a program like mine, you definitely want to have at least 3 people that you could rotate with. But even just in general, you never know, professors leave, they retire, they don't have funding. That's something I've already experienced even just in my little time being a PhD student. So you want to have options. So really do pick like the school that you apply to based on professors and not just based on the school name, because it just makes your life so much easier and less stress-free. More stress-free. Oh gosh. I've now lost count of what number we're on. So whatever number this is, my next piece of advice is to leave a lot of time for applying like to PhD programs. So this is something I did not do well. I remember my first application was due November 15th, and I actually started working on my applications November 1st. Terrible idea. Terrible. Thankfully, at least for me, I had told my recommenders earlier on that I needed them to write a letter of recommendation for me. but still, like, you want to start very, very early because you want to have a lot of people to read your statement of purpose. It really helps. For one, it helps them to catch like grammar errors, like anything that you missed, because you will miss a lot of things in your statement of purpose. You probably think it's good, but it can use so many reiterations. And you also want to have time to implement the feedback, and you want to ask like a varied number of people. Like, you want to ask your PI, other grad students, just in general, just leave a lot of time. And something else is, make sure you also don't leave the administrative, like typically there's a form that you have to fill online with your name, blah blah blah. Sometimes I left these to the very like last hour, and that was a terrible idea. I remember, for example, Stanford, they had extra questions in their like administrative forms that they wanted me to fill. They're like, have you taken this class, have you taken this class, what was your experience with this? And I remember I was panicking because I was like, I have to submit this in the next hour, and I did not realize there were all of these questions. So if you can actually start working on the administrative form part of your applications and don't leave it just till the last minute. My next piece of advice, and this is something that is quite specific for biomedical sciences PhD programs, is you really, I don't think it helps to take the GRE. Like, I think you can save money and you can save your time by not taking the GRE. I feel like most programs now don't require it, especially after COVID. They don't require it, or they say it's optional. And as far as I've heard, the only people who really potentially could benefit is if your GPA is really, really low. And even then, I don't know how much of a difference it makes. So I'll also leave in the description box. It was this list. It's actually from Hello PhD, the podcast that I told you about. One of the people, so Josh, in the podcast, he made a list of all the schools that do not require the GRE, because many schools are also phasing it out because they say it's actually not a good correlation. Like, the GRE score is not a good correlation for like students' performance in a PhD program. So many of them are phasing it out. And I'll leave the link in the description of like all the schools that no longer require it. I definitely did not take it. I only applied to schools that did not require the GRE. And I do not regret not taking it. I feel like that would just have been something else that was like a like sink of my time, something else that'll have made me worried. And yeah, I just don't think it helped. And now my next piece of advice is that something else that will happen is the waiting period in a PhD program, like when you apply, is the absolute worst. Like, I did not know PhD programs, most of them typically roll out admissions. Thankfully, the school I'm at now actually did not, which was very nice. Like, they told us the specific date that they will release the admissions decision, which was very, very nice. But many of them, they won't tell you like when they're going to inform you of a decision, so you just have to wait. And I feel like I wish I had had a game plan before then, because I truly thought I was going to lose my mind. And all of this also happens like, over like Christmas break. So it's like that time of like everybody's celebrating, there's joy and happiness in the air, and you are just anxious. So if you're applying to PhD programs, I say have a game plan for now. Like, something I wish I had done, for example, is just save up all my TV shows, like not watch my TV shows until then, so I could just binge watch all my TV shows and distract myself. So however you want to distract yourself, you really need to make a game plan right now. And during that time, I'll also say be very cautious with like if you decide to use Reddit or Grad Cafe, because I actually was on Reddit and Grad Cafe like during this waiting time. And even though like it was sometimes helpful because I'll be able to see like, oh, UCSF is sending out interview invites now. It was also very anxiety inducing. Like, I think it might have been better if I wasn't on it, because people sometimes just post like, oh, just got an interview invite from Washington University in St. Louis, and then you get nervous because you're like, wait, I don't see my interview invite. And you might not realize that they're just rolling out the interview invites, like they don't send it all out in bulk. So actually, I think I'll say maybe avoid Reddit and Grad Cafe. I feel like it just causes more anxiety than it is helpful. Like, you get the interview invite when you get it, and if you don't get it, then you don't get it. Like, you being on Reddit or Grad Cafe is not going to help. So I don't know, that I think that's my piece of advice. Avoid the websites. And also, speaking of those websites, even before this waiting period, even now, like when you're still thinking of applying, something that always happens on Reddit or Grad Cafe is that people always send out like their profiles. People are like, oh, like, rate me, do you think I'm going to get into X, Y, and Z schools? I remember I would see some of those profiles and they were so good. People like, I have 5 publications, 10 publications, 10 years of research experience, 7 letters of recommendation. And I always think like, there's no way this is the person that, like, if I am competing against this person for a spot in a PhD program, how would I ever get in? And I like absolutely take those things with a grain of salt, because there's so much more to a person's application. Like the statements of purpose is very, very important. Letters of recommendation are extremely important. And those things, like, people cannot share all of their like whole PhD application package with you. They would only share like their stats, which might not even be like accurate. Some people just, lie on Reddit or Grad Cafe just to like hype themselves up. So I'd say that if you do choose to go to like Reddit and like see all of these different profiles, you definitely should take it with a grain of salt. Don't let it discourage you. That was something that happened with me. I was like, no, there's no way I'm getting into a grad school. Like, so if you do want to apply to grad school programs, I say go for it. Like, do not let any of these profiles stop you. Now, another piece of advice, this one might be more obvious, I feel, but make sure you actually do tailor your application to the specific school. It takes time, but it is really important because schools want to know that you're applying to them for them. They don't just want someone who's just applying generically. They want someone who actually has taken the time to like look up the specific professors that they want to work with and like why specifically they want to apply to that school. So for me, for example, in all my statements of purpose or like personal statements, because different schools require different things, I always listed at least 3 professors that I was interested in working with. And I didn't just list the professors' names. I always said like, oh, I'm interested in working with Professor Bob as he is working on CD8 T cells, and I'm really interested in that area of research, or something, just like even just a one liner where I can say something like that about at least 3 professors. And then I also always listed something about the program in particular. And something I've heard is that you shouldn't say the location of the school as like a, oh, I just want to live in North Carolina. Like, that's not a good enough reason. But it should be something about the program. Like for one of mine, it was even just simply like, oh, I see that you guys have this diversity program that I'm interested in, or you guys have this mental health initiative that I am like impressed by and I want to contribute to. So something like that that you can touch on is very important. And that's another reason why you need to start applying early, because if you wait till the last minute, you might not have enough time to actually do research on like these different aspects of the program. Like, I legitimately read the websites through and through for almost every single program that I applied to. There were some that I was like, okay, I'm just tired, I can't do this. And there were some that, of course, it was easier to find something unique about the program, but it is kind of hard. So you do want to leave ample time to be able to like scour the website and see something unique that you can touch on in your like application. And another piece of advice, which is something like I feel like based on the Reddit posts that I see people post like after they apply, and also what I experienced, is you probably will make a mistake somewhere in your application. Like maybe you say the wrong name of the school. Like, it happened to one of my friends. She wanted to apply to school A, but then she said, I'm so eager to apply to school B, and then she submitted that essay to school A. Like, mistakes will happen. For me, it was like my transcript, I thought I'd submitted it, but then I'd actually submitted a blank page. Something will go wrong because you're probably applying to a lot of schools. And I feel like the most important thing is do not panic when it goes wrong. And most times I feel like these schools they know mistakes will happen. This is also something I learned on the Hello PhD podcast. They had a podcast where they spoke about like what should you do if like mistakes happen, and they were like, it happens a lot actually. They see a lot of students who make little tiny mistakes, but if they really do want the student, if everything else in the package is okay, that little tiny mistake you made is not enough for them to actually not accept you. So that's very important. If there is a mistake, do not panic. But also, it's totally fine for you to reach out to like administration. So in my case, when my transcript, I submitted a blank page, I just reached out to the administrative like staff and I was like, hi, I just looked back at my application. I submitted a blank page. Here is my actual like transcript. And it was still fine. I got an interview to the school. I got accepted to the school. So everything was ultimately fine. But just don't like email too much the administrative. I feel like that could be bad. But if it's some little mistake that you think could hurt you, just email and it will be fine. Yeah. And my final piece of advice that I can think of right now, because there's probably so many more that I'm just not thinking about, but if I do, I'll make maybe a part 2 to this. But my final piece of advice is slightly pessimistic, but I know when I was applying, everyone around me was like, oh, you'll get into all the schools. Like, oh, it's okay, you'll get in. Like, and it's very nice that people say that, but also don't take it too much to heart, like, because truly you are competing with a lot of different people who are also applying to PhD programs. So definitely have hope that you will get in, but like don't be crushed if you don't get in everywhere. Like it's very common for people to have to reapply to PhD programs again, for them to have to try again. And if you get rejected, it's not the end of the world. Like you will survive, you'll be fine. At least you tried, and you can try again next year. So yeah, that is all. I will probably make more PhD videos in the coming weeks because that is now what my whole time is spent on. But yes, anyways, thank you for watching.